Right now, we'd like to welcome you all out to the Hippy Garage. And we are going to do a basic bearing assembly, starting with a race assembly and a bearing assembly. Now, I want to be very clear as we start here. I want to show you something. Here we have a bunch of races and we have a bunch of bearings that go to a particular trailer, okay? Now, what we've done is we've mixed everything up, so the bad news is that when I've done all that, the wear pattern between these bearings here, don't know where they go. So I can guarantee you that no matter how I put this together, I'm going to have a short-lived bearing and race assembly on one side. The other one side's new, but this side isn't quite as new. And because of the wear pattern that sets up on these tapered bearings, and again, this is a tapered bearing because it's tapered in this way. When it sets up a wear pattern and you go against that wear pattern, then you have excessive wear. All I can do right now today is put this together in a mock demonstration and kind of figure what bearings are going to work the best. The one bearings that's not going to work really good, if you look at the bearings, you'll see that we've got one that's kind of dented here, and I've got to find out which one it is. I think it's this one here. You can see the dent on it. If I put it right down there, you can see the dent right there. This one here looks a little bit deformed. And what I do is I'll put them in a race and I'll kind of twist them. And I'll feel and see if the bearings actually, this bearing feels a little rough. And it might be the race assembly. It looks like it was. It looks like the race assembly was bad. So when I just do this and I can feel it, I push it together like that as hard as I can and feel that. I can kind of tell that I've got a fairly good set of bearings here. So we're going to go with these two sets of bearings. And we're going to take these and put these away. Okay, does that sound fair to everybody so far? Now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to have a student come on up here. And we still got a race that's in here. Again, let me show you what that race looks like. We got this race. There's one on this side that's been pulled out. But this side still is stuck in there. We need to take that race out. So that's the objective today, but before we get into that, let's go really quickly what we need to do to finish the installation. The bearing's going to go here like that. Then we have the axle seal that goes in here like this, that seals the turning axle, and the bearing and all the grease that goes inside here stays in because of that axle seal. Is everybody all right with that? Okay. And we saw how to get that axle seal out. We used the axle nut. And we took the axle nut and put it inside here like that. And when we pulled back it hard like that with the axle nut, the bearing and the seal popped out and the seal left was undamaged. In fact, this is the old seal and it's perfect condition. Okay? So, want to make a note that this nut is called an axle nut, and this nut has castellations. It's a castellated axle nut. It's with castellations on the top. All right, so we're going to move forward now, and I'm going to have a student come up. This is going to be a little bit difficult for students who haven't done this before, and you will make mistakes, so be ready to make mistakes. The only mistake you can't make is not wearing safety glasses. So I am going to call on Dents to come up here, but I need to have him wear his not dark glasses, but his safety glasses. Do you have a set of safety glasses? Yeah. While he's getting his safety glasses, I am going to ask... I'm going to ask, okay, and let me go grab my, let me get my light so he can see. Let me come around. I'm going to get my little headlight thing. Silence. All right, so what's going to happen now is we have a student who will remain faceless. He's going to take this chisel and he's going to take this right in here and he's going to get the back of that bearing and hit it this way and force this race out. So he's going to do that now by slanting that against there and holding it, pinning that with his finger against there and hitting that. So let's see how he does that without hitting his hand. So the way I hold it is I'll hold it like this, keeping my hand out of the way like that. Okay, so go ahead and hit that. And you can see that that came out relatively easy. Okay. Now, everybody take a look at this. Thanks, Dimps, for that excellent work. Now, what he's got done right now is pretty good. Now, I want to show you something else. Right now, you have to understand that this race here has got to go in only one way. You put it in the wrong way, and it'll never come out. So the wrong way would be the skinny end or the tapered end this way. That would not allow you to put a chisel in and to punch it out. The way that has the ledge or the seat has got to go in here and seat against that. Does everybody see? Can everybody see the seat right in here? It's right there, and I'm hoping that you can see it. I'm going to get all the grease out of it, and it has to be very clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm going to ensure this cleanliness by taking it here, dipping it into a little diesel fuel, and making sure that I've got a clean rag. And now I'm going to show you something else. I'm going to have you stop that in just a minute, but hold on. I want to make sure we know how much cleanliness is important on these things, okay? Now I'm going to show you guys a brand new technique, something you haven't seen before. So wait here and I'll go get the special tool and let's stop. All right, now we've got this all ready to go in. We are now going to install the race. And here we go. We're going to go ahead and install the race. So I want to make sure the race is cleaned off. It's got a little bit of lubrication from the diesel fuel. I'm going to go ahead now and grab this tool here and put it on there. Then I'm going to grab this and put this socket and down so I don't hurt the socket. Looks like I may not need to have that. That might be fine. I'll recenter that to where the race is sitting squarely in here. This is going squarely in there like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn this to the right. And that locks this in. Now I want to let you know to always let the pressure off when you're done using this. Don't use the handle when you're just bringing this down into position. It's a lot slower when you hook the handle up to it. I only use the handle when I'm starting to put pressure on the press. Now that bearing, I pounded on it yesterday really hard and it barely went in. It was like really hard going in. But now I'm going to line all this up. Now does this look like it's lined up to everyone? Mm-hmm. Does that look about right? No. First period was really good on this. Now watch that race. If you can see that race right in there, I'm going to start putting pressure. Notice how the race kind of finds its own center. It's going to find its own center. It's going to go right on in there. It's a lot of pressure. Let that off. And pray that that comes out, right? Okay, I'm going to flip it around. And remember, the race has got a seat right back in there. It's so important. Okay, so now I'm going to put the next race in. Make sure it's been cleaned off. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in. Oops. Bring my socket in there in place. And again, I can't stress this enough to keep things clean. If you drop something, like I just dropped that, I've been having the dropsies all day. Try to clean things up. Put the socket to where you've got the 1/2-inch drive coming up so you don't ruin the hex part of the socket. Tighten it back down to the right. And I want to talk to you now when we're getting in place right here. Last week I had a student do this, and the student last week had a problem. And here, I'll show it to you in just a moment. This is what he did wrong. This is where paying attention to the right things at the right times really pays off. Okay, he had it all centered up here fine. It was centered perfectly. Had it all centered. When he started to put weight on, it's not quite centered here. You can see it's a little bit off. If that's the case, you can always turn it. Kind of center it up like that. But see these studs right here? Okay. He had the bolts out too far, and as he pushed down here, these studs started coming out. That's how you get those studs to come out. So I want you to know that if this isn't, it's not centered now because I'm trying to get it in straight. So just be mindful of one thing. When you're coming down on a press like this, I'm going to back off a little bit. Just enough to recenter it now that I got it going straight. And go ahead and recenter. These studs go out this way. You can ruin or have those studs go out, and then you've got to press them back in again. Okay, that one's pressed in fairly good. Is this a lot easier than pounding it in?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you like this method a little bit better?
Yeah.
At the finished product, you can see down in there. It's very well seated. Okay, quit for now. Let's go back to our seat. Grease. I want to do a couple things. They say back in the old days when they were working out on the farm on tractors and stuff, they said never put anything together metal to metal that's moving dry. What that means is I'm not going to put a greased bearing in a dry race. I'm just not. What I want to do is I want to throw some grease on something. I want to make sure that wherever I put something together, it's going to have a layer of grease. So grease goes on grease. A greased bearing is going to go on a greased race. It's not going to go in dry. That makes sense to everyone? So now that we've got that already, I got that greased. I always start with the inside because that's where the seal's going to go, or the inside or back side of the hub. This is the part that goes towards the center. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grease this up a little bit and get that greased. And now comes the time I want to grease a bearing. Now this gets a little bit, difficult, and I'll show you why. First off, I've got a clean bearing, and I'm going to go ahead and put the bearing in here. The bearing goes right in here like that. Now I'm going to put the bearing right on the leg. I got to put it on a supporting leg. Now why do I got to do that? I will show you. This is really, and it's a good thing that I'm overweight. Why? Because if I wasn't overweight, I wouldn't be able to grease this bearing. Watch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put all 195 pounds on that. Remove that, and I barely got it greased. See that? Can you guys all see that okay? Go back to the camera. But I can tell the grease came out on there, so I'm greased, but I still don't believe it. I'm still skeptical, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wash my hand, or clean my hands off, get all the dirt off them. Now with all the dirt off my hands, I have to check the bearing, so here's how I'm going to check it. I'm going to take the grease here like that. Cole, do you want to shut that door there? Put the grease on here like that. I'm going to grab my bearing and I'm going to check it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch this side right here, and I'm going to hand grease it. What I'm going to do is to make sure, let me turn on my little flashlight. I'm going to make sure that the grease starts to come out. See how it's starting to come out right here? I'm just making sure. See how it's starting to come out? Can everybody maybe see that while I'm filming it at the same time? Okay, I'm trying to get that grease to come out, turning it, and it looks like I got that in pretty good shape. I'm still checking the bearing. I want to make sure by hand that I've checked the bearing to every bit that I can check it, because if I don't check to make sure this bearing's greased, then I'm going to have a bearing that's gone. All right, now I need more grease in this, so what I'll do is I'll just take this thing like here, push down a little bit, and I got plenty of grease in there now. Okay, now that I've got the grease, I want to check a couple more spots, and I hope everybody can see that grease coming out of there. I hope it's more than obvious. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and install this. Again, I'm not going to put anything together dry. I'm going to go ahead, so if you want to stand up and just film this, I'm going to go ahead and put that in there like that. Like that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is grab a bunch of grease and put it up on a 45-degree angle. I want to grease the back side of that bearing, and that is all. So I have to kind of hold it down with my finger. Got to grease the back side of that bearing. That's all I can do. And I'm going to show you what it looks like when I'm done. Generally speaking, this is a very important part of the job. When I'm done, you can kind of see in there, I got plenty of grease. It's on the back side of the bearing. Now, what happens if you over grease it? Now, I have a student that put a grease fitting, they're called a quick fit, and it goes on here on the end, and you can use a grease gun and pump it full of grease. But there's a problem with that, and I'll tell you here in a minute. But first, let me show you how to pack the bearing. Now that I've got a packed bearing in there, I want to kind of pack some more grease in there because I want the seal to pack the bearing in. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in there like this. I'm going to put that as much grease on the top as possible. And now I'm going to go ahead and put the seal on. So here it goes. Got the seal right here. As I put the seal down on there, I'm actually packing the bearing with it. Now usually you got to hammer these on a little bit, so now I'm packing grease back up inside that seal. I want that seal to be completely greased. Okay, now that I've got that done, I need to kind of clean it off. And with the rag, I'm going to make sure that that is pretty much cleaned off. Okay, I don't want to have too much grease after I've got a finished product, so I'm going to clean this off. Now I want to tell you something. The student that did this mistake, he had two things going wrong with him. When he was greasing this, he left too much grease back here and it got on his rotor. This doesn't have a rotor. I agree. I understand that. But his application had a rotor out here. And because there was a rotor out there, all that grease went on that rotor. So I want you all to be careful not to get too much grease on that. Now I'm going to check the seal. Looks like the seal's on tight enough. Now I'm going to flip it around. The other problem that he had, now again, you can see down in there how much grease I've got. Throw the fresh bearing down in there. You guys can check this out on YouTube tonight. I'm going to go ahead and put all my weight. Again, I'm going to put one. Now, put a rag over the top or you'll slip off of that. And I had a student fall on his butt today doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it a chiropractic adjustment here. Hold on. Get it right with the leg here. Now, there's two things I don't want to see happen. I had a student put this on the hydraulic press. Don't do that. Don't put this little grease machine on the hydraulic press. Okay? You can put it down here if you want. If you have to, and I do sometimes have to do that, and you can step on it. That's okay. That's about all it's going to take though. But when I'm done, you can tell I've got the grease in there. And you can tell that my bearing has been greased. Hang on just a second. I'm going to pull this out. Okay, I'm going to check it for integrity. First off, I'm going to wipe it with a clean rag here. Wipe the palm of my hand. I'm going to grab some of this grease here. Maybe a little of this. And I'm going to check again for integrity. And I'm hoping you guys can see what I'm doing here. All I'm doing is I'm turning this and trying to see if I can get the grease to come out the other side. Can you see it starting to come out? I'm just checking. I want to be able to hand grease something because I trust this way a little bit more than I do anything else. And yes, it looks like this bearing has been packed pretty well and it's got grease in it. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and finish greasing this up here. And I don't have to go too crazy with this. I just got to put enough in there to make it last. Throw that in and I'm good to go. Now the next thing that comes out of this, put up my stuff, put everything kind of away. Now I've got to put one more thing together. I've got to have this retainer washer ready. This retainer washer is everything, because if I don't put this retainer washer on and I go ahead and I tighten this castellated nut, this axle nut, it's going to chew right through the bearing. So you guys all understand that, right? Okay, now that I've got that on, we're going to go ahead and make the install and set the preload and get this finished up today. We kind of know how to do the press now. That kind of works pretty good. Get grease on the shaft so water and moisture will stay off a clean shaft. Use your emery cloth like I showed you last time to condition that shaft. We'll do that tomorrow. And remember also that when you're setting that preload, don't let that hub turn. In closing on this demonstration right here, I want to tell you what else happened. One of the students had a grease fitting. It was on the end of the cap like this. He just put a grease zerk on here and he put a fitting right there and he pumped grease in it. And what he did is he filled the entire hub cavity full of grease. The problem with that is it has nowhere to dissipate heat. So when that grease gets hot on a summer day and there's nowhere for that heat to go, you might have yourself a fire. You've got to have air cooling that air inside, that air pocket inside that hub cavity. So don't over grease these. And don't mix your greases. Don't put in multi-dilithium with a marine grease. Okay guys, ready to go? All right, shut it off and we'll walk. Now, I've got this shaft. It's cleaned off, it's wiped off, but it's got a lot of, I don't know, a little bit of debris in there. I should have taken a brush and cleaned it off. I've taken sandpaper and sanded the bearing areas, so it's all good. And this is where the axle seal will ride right there. Does everybody see that? That's where the seal goes. That's where the inner bearing goes. That's where the outer bearing goes. That's where the axle nut goes. So, with that grease, wherever it is, does somebody want to hand me that grease over there? I'm going to go ahead and grease this shaft right here. Are we filming that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to grease this shaft right here to keep the moisture off the shaft. You can already see, if you guys can't see, tell me if you can or not. Oops, you want to grab that? Oh, there. So what I'm going to do is grab a little bit of grease out of this, and I'm going to grease this shaft right up in here. I don't want moisture to get on that shaft. It's already gotten on the shaft, okay? So I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to grease this shaft up really good, even the threads. I'm going to get greased up. The reason being is, especially on the bottom, don't forget to get underneath here. I do not want moisture on that shaft, and that will stay in there indefinitely. That shaft now has been waterproofed. All right. Now, generally, I have my paper underneath there ready to go. My whole assembly is ready to go on. Everything. I can throw that on right now, and I can bring it right into the axle nut. Everything's ready to go. Now, one thing I want you to remember is to line this thing up straight. If it goes in crooked, you're going to have a problem, and that's going to come in really crooked, and it's going to ruin the bearing. Now, how do you tell if the bearing's loose or tight? After the wheel is on, if it's a loose bearing, look at this. You're going to have movement. See that movement right there? That's a new loose bearing. So I'm going to tighten this down. Now on the preload, here we go. This will work for every bearing ever made as far as tapered bearings are concerned. So watch what I do. So here I'm going to come up tight until I can feel definite, I can feel a definite tension on that hub assembly. Then I'm going to back off by not letting this turn. I'm going to back off, and then I'm just going to go till the wrench stops, okay? So I'm going to put the wrench here and let gravity do the rest of the work for me. Just till the wrench stops. Just till the wrench stops. All right? That preload now is perfect. My problem is I can't find the hole to it. So where do I do? Do I go looser or tighter when I'm trying to find the hole? Okay, that is an ASE test question. Where was the hole? Was it on the side? Was it on the top? Does anybody remember? Anybody can tell me?
Top.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to lose my adjustment. I'm going to find it if I can. Can't really find it there. Let's see if I can find it here. Is it on the side? Right there. Okay. So that's about where I need to go. So now I want to show you the misconception of Carter keys. Carter keys typically are only designed, you have one end that's shorter and one end that's longer. Generally, to give the key more strength, I try, if possible. This one's a little bit different. But I only like to bend one end of it. Here's what I do. I'll take this like this and bend it all the way back. And I'll just tap it on there like that. Tap it on, there like that, and then this kind of like not so. I wish I had a little hammer. My hands are really greasy. There. Now this right here, I can either cut some of it off, which I tend to do. I want to keep this as straight as possible because it adds strength to the Carter key, if I can do that. So I got that straight, and it adds strength. See how that nut turns? So I want to have strength on that Carter key, okay? That's where I want to have the strength. Now I'm checking it back and forth. Feels like that's on pretty straight. It's rolling really comfortably now. Looks like I'm good to go. All I got to do now is put on the cap. But this is where we get in trouble. We can put it on any way you see fit, but the dead blow is the best way. It's rubber and it won't hurt anything. So that's a pretty much done job, except I want to clean the grease off. And I want to make sure we don't over-grease it, but we don't under-grease it. And when you're done, always feel back here to make sure that none of that grease comes out and that seal's doing its job. And what I can see from here, the seal is doing its job. So you want to shut that off?